Hello, it's Alden. I'm gonna build on the last tutorial about a cyberpunk sci-fi city and show you how to use geometry nodes to create some randomization when you're making an array. I've been making a cyberpunk city for my sci-fi film, The Robosexual, and I use these techniques to make shots like this and this. Now we're gonna do like a part 2 of this last tutorial about a cyberpunk city. One thing that works really well is just doing simple extrusions of buildings like we covered in the last tutorial, adding some lights to it. But if you look, and especially if there's like kind of like a big wide shot, you can see the repetition very easily. And so this is going to be a tutorial of how we can quickly change that with geometry nodes, which is to make a couple versions of the same image texture extruded differently and moving some details around, and then putting them in a collection using geometry nodes to pull from that collection randomly, which will just give more variation to the building facade than if it's just the same texture repeated again and again and again. So to start with, I'm gonna turn off all this stuff from the last tutorial. And we're gonna start with just this one plane that we ended up with last time, which has the corrugated texture on it. This we're gonna call building wall 1. And let's move it into a collection and call it building walls. And let's move this over. And we're gonna do 3 versions, variations of this. And so what I'm gonna do is go in here. We have a bit of geometry just because of all of the corrugated detailing. So this is a step you can do before you do all this corrugation, and then this could potentially be a lot simpler. But we can do it with the corrugation here too as well. So we're just gonna select all of those faces here. And we're gonna hit Shift-D, duplicate it, and then let's just move it up to the top for now. And then now let's do the same thing for, let's say, this section here. And moving that up for now. I'm just gonna rearrange the order of the windows and the corrugated texture a couple of times so that I can have 3 versions where the windows and the thicker chunks of windows and the thicker chunk of the metal are in different places so that it becomes more randomized. So to start with, I'm just kind of duplicating all that stuff. So that's one single pane of windows. I can also go Shift-D and then just select it all. Now, move that down. And then that's that other single window. Now we just need one more of these. Okay, and this one, I'm actually going to delete that duplicate and make that a duplicate. And make another one that I'm just not going to touch and leave as is. So here, I'm going to just then take all of this. Probably going to do X-ray because I want to select everything. Okay. So now let's take this. Move it down. Let's take this. Move it down. Maybe there's 3. Let's do that. And what we want to make sure though is that the height is the same. But there we go. We have a variation of this wall here. And let's do the same thing over here. Bring that down. There's another one. Let's just add a fourth one, why not? Okay, so here's 4 different variations. Gonna turn that one off. And so now there is, so when we had one version, we could obviously use an array to create this wall, but now let's do that with geometry nodes where we're pulling from this collection. So actually, I'm gonna pull this one out of the collection. Building a wall, let's call it what, template. So building walls here has these 4 different walls. I will call them different numbers. So let's add just a new plane and click on geometry nodes up here and new. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is add an instances on points. And so the question is, what do we use for points and what do we use for instances? For instances, let's do a collection info, geometry to instance, and choose building walls. Nothing is showing up because we haven't told it where to go yet. To do an array, what we're going to add is a mesh line. Put that on points. And so this mesh line is also, this essentially is our array here. So this offset will determine what the array is here. So let's do, we want, let's do vertical first. So we'll call this first one Z. If I do combine X, Y, Z, do that to there, then I have this Z as its own value, and then I can move this Z over here, and this means the geometry node modifier will have this control over here, so we don't need to go into the geometry node tab to adjust it. So we're going to be putting some stuff over here in the group input so that we can control it all right here. In fact, one thing we might want to do is put the collection type there. And if you want, hit N to get the side menu, go to group. We can rearrange and rename everything over here. So we can call that Z offset. So this is giving us first basically an array of our 4 planes and making an array in Z space. But instead of controlling the entire collection, we want it to focus on just one element of the collection and then to randomize that. So those settings are going to be some stuff here in the collection and then also the instance index. So first we're going to do separate children. Before going to this step, I had to go back and make sure that the 4 wall panels in the collection were all in the same location. So I just moved them around so that they were all aligned and that their origin was set to their geometry. So all in the same location and then set them to all the same thing. And then here we go, then our geometry nodes make sense. So right now it's stacking all 4 vertically. And so if we add a random value to the instance index, set it to 1 and 4 because we have 4 instances there. Pick an instance, separate children. It's going to choose one of the 4 and that's what's going to be the next one up. So if you look here, and kind of compare this to this one here. This is just an array. you can see a repeating pattern on the one on the left, and the one on the right has much more variation. So you can get away with repeating and making an array of the same thing much more than with this one. So that is the X, and then that is the Z offset. So let's add some things into our group here. So this is the random seed. So let's call that random seed. And now let's take these settings here, Shift D, because now we are going to offset it on the x-axis. So let's say 1 for now. All of these settings are going to be the same. And then we are going to take this instance and set it into here. Uncheck pick instance, and then move that to there. So we're basically taking all of this. It's kind of like when you're doing the shader editor and you are kind of like adding a mix shader to more and more stuff. That's kind of what's going on here, where we set up this instance on points and then we input it into another one. This offset isn't enough, of course, so let's choose something like that. Something a little smaller. There we go. And then we can take that offset, X offset, and put it here too, because we might want to adjust that later. So if we take this, we can do a random seed, and it's going to randomly select one of the 4, and then we end up with this massive kind of apartment wall, industrial wall area that we have much more room to play with, making a big cityscape. The other thing we can do is also make this curved like we did before. We can do that with geometry nodes as well. So first we're going to make a curve. Let's scale it to like that. All transforms. And we're going to go object info. We want that, this one, curve to points, put the geometry to curve. We're also going to take a line to vector here, and we're going to take our tangent, plug it into vector, and rotation into rotation. Change it to Y, and this is basically going to make sure that everything is angled the right way in that curve. Okay, so now I'm just gonna put that down here, because we're gonna take these points, and then we're gonna take this rotation here and set it there. So similar to when you're using the curve modifier, you need the locations to be the same. So by moving these guys into the middle, then suddenly we have our perfect little cylinder, and we can just do some adjustments to scale will affect that one. And then the Z offset, we can do that. We have a pretty big cylindrical column of an industrial area. And because of the geometry nodes, this pattern isn't repeating exactly each and every time. So you do see some stuff here in the windows. And if we wanted to, we could basically go into each of those 4 and like rotate the windows 180 degrees, and that'll break up some of this stuff as well. And then I think also playing with the scale, because right now you can kind of really see those flat planes. So if we bring the scale down, this is going to be crazy, but let's render it. That has some better curvature. There's definitely some overlapping and stuff going on there, but you can play with that and get something you like. The nice thing is that most of these are background assets, so as long as you have detail and you have something that isn't too much of a completely repeating shape. This is gonna look nice. Hopefully this was helpful. If you want access to the project file, let me know. I've been toying with the idea of putting together a Patreon to give you access to all of this, but I'm not sure if anyone actually wants that, so let me know in the comments below.